The Boldt decision is critically important.
It's truly a remarkable decision.
It's very powerful. It's one of the most powerful environmental documents we have.
It was hugely significant in the history of Washington State and the Northwest, and there's also implications internationally.
It's obviously a very important ruling.
In 1974, Judge George Boldt ruled on the court case United States versus Washington, which became more commonly known as the Boldt decision. He ruled that Native Americans that reserved the right to fish in their treaties with the United States of America are still entitled to that right, and that treaty rights cannot be ignored. He also made them co-managers of Washington state fisheries so that they would have a voice in how the salmon resource is managed. These factors make the Boldt decision the foremost turning point for Northwest Native American tribes since their treaties with the United States.
The linchpin for all this are the treaties that were made in 1855 and 1856 by the Territorial Governor and Superintendent of Indian Affairs, Isaac I. Stevens.
The treaties recognized that the tribes were surrendering to the United States millions upon millions of acres here in the Northwest in return for surrendering those lands and agreeing to move to the reservations. They reserved the right to continue to hunt and fish in all of their usual and accustomed places.
However, not all the tribes share the same story.
5 treaties in Western Washington. Each of the 5 treaties, there were several people that signed the treaty. They made the deal, and that's how they became treaty tribes. Now, when Governor Stevens came to the Southwest Washington tribes, he brought them all together in a big meeting on the Chehalis River in late February 1855, and he had an entirely different treaty that he offered us. Here's what the treaty was. All you guys in the Southwest Washington, all you tribes are going to become one tribe, and you're all going to move up north of the Kanawha River, and then you have to give up all your land. He wanted us to give up 3 million acres to go live together with people who spoke different languages and didn't like us very much, to move up into the rainforest. All of our tribes said, sorry, Governor, that just don't work for us. He finally threw up his hands and walked away, so that's why we don't have any treaty.
Other interests started, mostly economic interests, canneries, commercial fishing, that kind of stuff, started to come up in the late 1800s.
In a mechanized way, the whites began to take millions more fish than the Indians.
There was sort of a financial incentive to ignore the treaties.
So the lead up to the Boldt decision was an increasing feeling on the part of indigenous peoples across America and in the Northwest that they'd been cheated of their treaty rights. This led to a lot of protests and fish-ins, as they called them, where the Indians defied state laws and state rules and were arrested for fishing in places we're not supposed to fish.
The one that I saw in 1954 featured the Hollywood actor Marlon Brando, who joined the Nisqually and Puyallup in protest state regulation that the tribe believes violated their treaty rights.
So the big tumultuous thing was a fish-in where any number of Puyallups and Nisquallies were tear-gassed, and there was a big set to, and shots were fired. It was a wonder no one was killed.
The Boldt decision came about because the U.S. Attorney General in Seattle, a guy named Stan Pitkin, he knew that with all the protests and stuff, it was getting worse, getting dangerous, so he filed the plaintiff's briefs. So it was U.S. versus Washington State.
So enter Judge Boldt, 1973, and there's several weeks of hearings where Indian elders and anthropologists talk about what salmon mean to the treaty tribes.
After a 3-week trial following 3 years of research, Judge Boldt rules in favor of the Native Americans, upholding their treaty-protected fishing rights and making them co-managers of fisheries in the state of Washington.
During the Boldt decision, I was the city editor at the Daily World in Aberdeen, Washington. So I was in the newsroom on February 12, 1974, when the word came across the Associated Press teletype that Boldt had ruled in favor of the treaty tribe. Boldt, he consulted some dictionaries from the 1850s that led him to believe that in common with meant up to 50%. So that was the bombshell.
The non-Indians got upset. They started protests. The state legislature got upset. And the state Supreme Court got upset. They wouldn't abide by the decision. So the federal authorities had to step in and take over the fishery. That's what the federal did after all the white protests.
When the Supreme Court upheld the Boldt decision in 1979, this fighting finally began to stop. With no more options to appeal the decision, the state and the tribes could move to the issue of cooperating in salmon management, as federally ordered based on Judge Boldt's ruling. To work together in managing the salmon effectively, the North of Falcon Process and the Pacific Fishery Management Council were created. These meeting series between Oregon, Washington, the tribes, sports fishermen, and commercial fishermen are set in March and April to determine the amount of salmon each party can catch.
They decide which groups are going to get to harvest which salmon. It's a very complicated process. Sometimes the North of Falcon discussions go on for over a week, and that's how they set the seasons and the limits.
This was an unprecedented breakthrough in tribal-state relations, forging new connections that last to this day. But this is not the only way the Boldt decision can be felt now. It plays a key role in many treaty rights disputes because of how it upheld them.
You know, the Boldt decision also is one of the reasons that tribal members can harvest shellfish on beaches, even if it's private land. That was an expression of the Boldt decision too. It's called the Rafidi decision, and it came out of the Boldt case. So that's the shellfish piece of fish.
Recently, a project advanced by British Petroleum, an oil company, to build a coal port on Native American ancestral lands was rejected because of the precedent set by the Boldt decision.
So build a dock and ships would come from Asia and load up with coal and then go across the ocean back to Asia. The Native American tribe in that region, the Lummi Nation, said, I don't think so, because it was going to impact their crab fishery, which happened in the same water. That's the same fishing right that was protected by these treaties.
The Boldt decision also led to a 2013 court injunction that is forcing Washington state to replace culverts that prevent fish from traveling upstream. The culverts had been preventing salmon from returning to their historic spawning grounds, which was hurting salmon runs.
Right now, a lot of money is being spent to upgrade highway culverts. You've got a stream and a road. The stream is usually put in some kind of a pipe that's called a culvert. And if it's too small, culvert is above the level of the stream, the fish can't make the jump into the culvert, so it winds up blocking their ability to travel. And we're spending billions of dollars to fix those because of this treaty right. So you've got the Boldt decision for fishing, and then later the Rafidi decision happened for shellfish, and then after that came the coal port denial, and then after that came the culverts. Who knows what's next? And as Purse Tribe is advocating for taking out the lower Snake River dams on the position that they have a treaty-protected right to salmon, and those salmon are not surviving.
The Boldt decision is also an international turning point, inspiring key Canadian First Nations court cases, causing legal action by Japanese Indigenous people, and prompting the Australian government to recognize Indigenous rights. In the last century, there has been no turning point greater than the Boldt decision for Northwest Native Americans because it affirmed that treaties are the supreme law of the land, transformed tribal state relationships, protected salmon by beginning co-management practices, and has set precedent that continues to impact treaty right disputes.
I think its impact has been profound. I have real doubts that we would even have salmon here today if it weren't for the Boldt decision and the involvement of the tribes.
The Boldt decision is the reason that we still have salmon. It's the reason we have a chance to save them.